The future of Crimea. What do we see as the model for the future of Crimea? The liberation of Crimea is a matter of time. At any moment, the peninsula can return to Ukraine. Therefore, it is very important to think about an effective model for the future of Crimea right now. The strategy for the future of Crimea is determined not only by its geopolitical position, but also by the priority of its development for the entire country and the international community. After all, Crimea has a great potential in various aspects related to the economy, culture, tourism and natural resources. An economically active and stable Crimea can become a catalyst for the development of all Ukraine. Balanced use of its resources will help create new jobs and attract investments. Moreover, the preservation of Crimea's cultural heritage is important for the diversity of cultures in Ukraine. The tourism potential of the region can attract the attention of the travelers and promote the exchange of cultural values. A sustainable solution for the Crimea issue is key to stability and security in the region. Stability will help build trust between countries and ensure peaceful coexistence. Therefore, the model of the future of Crimea should be based on 5 main principles: positive Ukrainization, guaranteed protection of human rights, exercise of collective rights of indigenous peoples of Ukraine, national territorial autonomy of the Crimean Tatar people as a form of exercise of the right to self-determination of the indigenous peoples of Ukraine, economic and touristic development of the Crimea region. Positive Ukrainization. During the years of independence, Ukraine did not pay due attention to the Ukrainization of the peninsula. The Crimean Tatars were the first to raise the Ukrainian state flag in Crimea. And since the beginning of the Russian occupation, the Ukrainian flag waved over the buildings of the Majlis of the Crimean Tatar people for another 8 months. The Crimean Tatar national movement systematically supported the Ukrainization of Crimea because it saw the prospect of Ukraine's integration into Europe. Residents in the occupied territories should perceive Ukrainization as a system of values, not a threat. After all, Ukrainization is not chauvinism, not assimilation, not colonization, not falsification of historiography, not Nazism, not arbitrariness, not a violation of human rights, not a totalitarian regime. Ukrainization of Crimea is decolonization, deimperialization and decommunization, promotion of true historiography about Crimea, introduction to the Ukrainian language as the state language, preservation and development of languages of indigenous peoples of Ukraine and national minorities, protection of cultural heritage, guarantee of preservation of territorial integrity and national sovereignty of Ukraine, European and Euro-Atlantic integration, guaranteed protection of human rights. Russia is responsible for numerous human rights violations and war crimes in Crimea. Ukraine, as a legal and democratic state, is resisting Russian aggression. Ukraine guarantees the residents of Crimea to ensure basic human rights recognized by the entire civilized world: the right to life, liberty and personal integrity, freedom of thought and speech, the right to freely express one's views and beliefs, respect for human dignity, protection of property, freedom of movement and free choice of residence, freedom of worldview and religion, freedom of peaceful assembly and association, the right to social protection and health care, the right to education. National territorial autonomy of the Crimean Tatar people as a form of exercise of the right to self-determination of the indigenous peoples of Ukraine. National territorial autonomy should be implemented for restoration of historical justice, exercise of the right to self-determination of indigenous peoples of Ukraine, constitutional consolidation of unitary Ukraine, ensuring security and sustainable development of the Ukrainian state, preservation of indigenous peoples of Ukraine and the development of their language, culture, customs and economy, exercise of the political rights of the indigenous peoples of Ukraine. National territorial autonomy is the form of exercise of the right of the Crimean Tatar people to internal self-determination and the guarantee of protection of the right of other indigenous peoples and national minorities of Ukraine in Crimea. guaranteed representation of indigenous peoples of Ukraine in the representative body of autonomy, the Verkhovna Rada of the Autonomous Republic of Crimea, which is at least one-third of its composition and has the right to veto decisions that violate the Constitution of Ukraine and the rights of indigenous peoples. Proportional representation of indigenous peoples of Ukraine in elected bodies of local self-government. Exercise of the collective rights of indigenous peoples of Ukraine. In order to promote the consolidation and development of the Ukrainian nation, as well as the ethnic, cultural, linguistic and religious identity of the indigenous peoples of Ukraine, the Ukrainian state adopted the Law of Ukraine on Indigenous Peoples of Ukraine in 2021, which defines the rights of the indigenous peoples of Ukraine and the specifics of their exercise. In order to exercise the rights of indigenous peoples, the following actions have to be performed. The law on indigenous peoples of Ukraine has to be implemented, historical toponyms in Crimea have to be restored. The activities of representative bodies of indigenous peoples on the territory of Crimea have to be resumed with the corresponding regulation of their legal status. Historical justice has to be restored. A legal assessment of the genocide of the Crimean Tatar people has to be provided. The representation of indigenous peoples in the authorities of Ukraine at all levels has to be established. The right to self-determination of the indigenous peoples of Ukraine has to be exercised. Changes have to be made to Chapter 10 of the Constitution of Ukraine. The media of the indigenous peoples of Ukraine have to be created. Educational institutions have to be created to ensure the study of the language, history and culture of indigenous peoples. Revival and development of spiritual, religious and cultural traditions and customs. Preservation of tangible and intangible cultural heritage have to be ensured. Economic and touristic development of the Crimea region. Crimea is an economically developed and attractive tourist region of Ukraine. Crimea is the southern gate of Ukraine, the homeland of the indigenous peoples of Ukraine. It has an interesting and deep history. It is a crossroads of cultures and religions. Crimea is a region of two seas, endless steppes, mountain forests and unique landscapes. This region is attractive for investment, and that is ensured by self-sufficient communities, local resources and a balanced economic complex. This is a region, the economy of which should contribute to the strengthening of the national security on the Russian border. And this condition is the basis for the development of the peninsula. Crimea has all the prospects for the establishment of renewable energy sources, the development of an agro-industrial complex, history and recreation, in particular green and ethnotourism, the maritime complex, the traditional housekeeping of indigenous peoples, in particular the Crimean forest gardening, Chair in Crimean Tatar. A person, their dignity and the quality of their life should stand in the social area. And from a geopolitical point of view, the main wealth of Crimea is a favorable position of the largest trade routes of Europe and Asia. Therefore, Crimea must return to the civilized world and prosper.